Well, my name is Garrett Smith. I'm from Chicago. Came in a few days ago, and it's been awesome. This is my first time to Rome, so it's really exciting for me to be here. This is an interesting topic, and I appreciate you sort of taking a bet on, placing a bet on this, because it's weird. And I was actually really surprised when they accepted it, because it's very unusual, and this is sort of a testament to the conference and doing unusual things. So, but I'm completely psyched about this topic, and so hopefully I can get you excited about it too. All right, well, let's get into it. So I've been writing software for well over 20 years. I won't go into exactly how much over 20 years. It's been a long time. And when I started out, when you start out something, when you start something new, you read, and you read lots of books, and it's like, okay, how do you do this? How do you write software? How do you build it? And the predominating model at that time was very much along the line of construction. So the metaphors, the examples, the models, the way you think about it was very much like physical construction. So you'd put a foundation down, you'd build plumbing, you'd have detailed specifications. So it was important to get things right on paper before you spent a lot of time building something. It's just like a building, right? You want to make sure that the blueprints are just right, and then you start to build. Because once upon a time in software, this is actually what happened. You would take a lot of time to build the software because you'd use punch cards, quite literally. Now, I'm not quite this old. I've not done punch cards. I don't know if anyone here has done punch cards. I know some people who've done punch cards. It did actually happen at one time. But to do punch card development, you had to really, really, really get your stuff down. It was very much like building a house. And so we had things like detailed specifications, and that has stayed with us for a long, long time. I mean, still today, probably most folks here who build software are used to seeing models like this at some point in the stage, right? Or models like this at some point in the stage. There's very much a design-oriented philosophy around software, and that's fine. It's worked. The waterfall methodology eventually gets some stuff done, and then you have Agile that has come along the last, 10, 15 years, and really revolutionized the way we do software, taken a lot of common sense and applied them. But it's still very much design, and maybe not design forward or design first, but there's still a lot of the same thinking goes on, even with Agile, same sort of formal methodologies. And at some point you get bored. You get bored doing the same thing over and over. You get bored thinking about methodologies. And so I've been looking for something new, something sort of to entertain myself, if nothing else. And I want to just blow this stuff out of the water. I want to completely overturn the way we think about software, more as an experiment. I want to see what happens. So I'm not trying to be a revolutionary here, but maybe for my own sense of entertainment. I don't think we build houses when we build software. I think we build creatures. I think we build space aliens. We build houses or buildings. It's basically the same requirement, right? We need to keep the rain out, the weather out, warmth, food, house things. Same things we've been using for tens of thousands of years. When we build software, it's completely different. We're building something that has never existed in the history of the universe. It's much more similar to an organism than it is a structure. And so if that's the case, I want to think of software along the lines of biology. So what do I mean by that? What is software's biology? So I want to understand how nature solves problems. I have solves here in quotations because, as we're going to see, there really isn't a deliberate problem-solving process in nature. But I want to understand how apparent solutions emerge from a natural process. Right? I want to then focus on the mechanics of that. So this isn't some sort of philosophical thing. I want to understand how it actually happens because I want to take that and apply it to actual code. This isn't just like inspirational speaking. This is like, how does this work? Okay, how can I be a better programmer, a better software engineer, a better whatever I am at the software creation process? So software biology is really about using the knowledge of biology to inform, inspire, confirm ideas for software construction. This is not religion. This is not some formal methodology. This is going into a different discipline that's completely orthogonal, or almost completely orthogonal to software, and learning from it, and getting inspired by it, and having it reshape and reinform our thinking. So that's the premise, all right? Everyone with me on that? So I'm going to go through I'm going to go through a rant, because it wouldn't be appropriate if I didn't do a rant. And then I want to show some specific examples of how biological phenomena can be applied very directly, and I think very smartly, to software development. Okay, so this is my thing. I have a problem right now. By the way, I know I'm in Rome, and I know it's like a week before Easter, so I just wanted to sneak this in here. All due respect right? It's, I'm not trying to be disrespectful here, but I want to make a point. And that is, in software, we have a centralized, sort of established notion that software must be designed. And when you look around us, apart from creation stories, we realize that complex things don't have to be designed. They don't have to be designed. We're going to see this. Really, really complex things don't have to be designed. And when I interact with colleagues, I run into this all the time. It's like this idea that human beings have sort of like a God persona. We can see into the future, and we can breathe magical words of creation, and out comes Earth, out comes our software, out comes some sort of creation. And I don't like that anymore. I'm starting to reject that. I think that's a bad idea. And I think, though I'm empathetic with it and trying to understand how this happens, I think this is how it happens. We as humans have a very unique brain structure. So we've got two sides, and this is fairly dated. This is actually not the way the brain works. It's much more complicated than this, but traditionally we've separated it into left and right. So the right side is sort of the intuitive side, sort of the synthetic side. We kind of connect the points, or we conceive of new points. The left side is where we connect the points. It's literal. It's connecting things together. And the danger is, for us, for humans, we're unique in this respect. We can see things that don't exist, but we believe that they exist. Right? Have you ever woken up from a sleep with an elevated pulse, or started up and you just had this dream where you're like, oh, it's just a dream, thank goodness. Your body thought that that was actually happening. You didn't know the difference. It was the same exact mechanics happening in your brain. Now, I know that dogs dream because they do that, they chase rabbits. So maybe dogs do the same thing, and maybe there are other animals, but we really have this ability to conceive, oh, there's the moon, let's go there. I'm pretty sure dogs don't think that. Maybe they do. But we went to the moon because of a vision thing. So we saw something that didn't exist. So this is great. This is fantastic. This is what makes humans unique as a species. The problem is that it can be applied to this as well. We can see a design in our mind's eye, and we can believe that it actually exists. The problem is that existence doesn't work that way. We don't have God powers to just create software. Software is created like anything else in this universe is created. And we're going to look at some step-by-step. We'll see that this sort of ability to envision something has to be suspended to an extent. And we then respect the mechanics of how something is actually built. So this gets into this process of creation. How do we actually create? In my opinion, we don't create by prognosticating. We don't call a shot. We don't say, oh, I'm going to design this thing, and I'm going to have this elaborate process in my mind. I don't think that's true. But let's look what some folks say about this. So this is one of the sort of reputed creators, Thomas Edison. Right? So he has a lot of inventions accredited to him. But he says this about genius. He says that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. That's kind of cute. It's very cool. It's a cool quote. What he's saying here is this idea that we sort of as the God creatures can go and conceive of something and then it just comes to be is really a bit of a fallacy. That our creative power is very small, our inspiration in the scope of genius. The real effort here is in the real engine is in effort. It's in experimentation, it's in perspiration, it's in sweat, in work. It's 1% inspiration. And that kind of turns the traditional, this idea of the designer, the architect, it kind of turns it on its head and says, it's really not about you as a brilliant genius. Maybe 1%. It's mostly about hard work. So let's take this quote, put it in our pocket, and take a look at a different quote on genius. This is Paul Valéry, late 19th century, early 20th century philosopher, essayist. He says it takes two to invent anything. This is a quote on genius. He's going to be talking about genius here. It takes two to invent anything. The one makes up combinations. The other chooses, recognizes what he wishes, and what's important to him. Genius is the readiness of the second one to grasp the value of what's been laid before him and to choose it. Now, when I first read this, I kind of glossed over it. But over the last year or so, it hasn't even been that long, it's been about 6 months, this quote has probably been the most transformative in my thinking about software. So I want to go back and review it. Let's make sure we really understand this. It takes two to invent anything. 1, 2. Two sides. This guy over here, he sets out combinations. It's like generating options. A, B, C, D, E, F. It's like going shopping. You see a catalog of all the different things that you can buy. The other one over here chooses and recognizes what he wishes and what's important to him. And so it's a twofold process, generating options and then selecting. Genius is the readiness of the second one to grasp the value. So maybe call it fashion sense. Right? You see something and it's like, that's what I want. That's valuable. I can use that. And it's a twofold process. And the reason that this is an important quote, and the reason this is so powerful, is it's this. What he's describing here is natural selection, or it's a form of selection. We have artificial selection, humans. Natural selection works this way, right? Genius is twofold. One sets out combinations, options. The other one selects what is appropriate. Of course, in nature, it isn't an explicit selection process. It's natural selection. So the option here, which is most suitable for survival, will get selected. This one's for fruit. This one's for insects. This one, I don't know what it's actually for. Let's just say it's for fruit. If there's lots of fruit there, that will get selected. That's genius. Very simple, very axiomatic, primitive. But when applied to software, it's transformative. I'll get into that. Don't worry. So you might be saying, okay, look, Garrett, you're making a pretty big claim here. You're basically saying that software development is natural selection. Okay, you've used a really nice example of some finches. Well, let's take a look at something that is really, really innovative. I mean, really, really innovative, photosynthesis. So I just want to show you something. In case you're skeptical that nature is just too simple, like as software programmers, we're really in the business of harnessing the user requirements and use cases and stories. And nature does its thing. But it's sort of trivialize it. Let's take a look at this thing. Photosynthesis is crazy. All right. Photosynthesis, now, I'm not a life scientist. I'm not a biologist. I've just read a little bit about this. I'm going to be very high level. But this is how photosynthesis works at a high level. It's two stages. Light stage, meaning it uses sunlight. Dark stage means it doesn't use sunlight. Effectively, what's going on is light is used to pry apart a water molecule and pull apart its hydrogen, its electrons in hydrogen. Stop right there. If we can figure out as human species how to do this, we've solved the energy crisis for all time. We've got lots of light, we've got lots of water. If we can split this guy apart, we use the hydrogen for fuel. We use the hydrogen for fuel, it's clean, it's renewable, it's sustainable. Right there off the bat, photosynthesis has us beat. Hands down. This would be the greatest single greatest invention of mankind, of humankind, if we could figure this out. Photosynthesis has it figured out. Photosynthesis, who knew? All right, so this electron is then used to generate a couple of compounds, ADP and NADPH. That feeds into the dark cycle, and carbon dioxide is pulled in. This forces hydrogen into this molecule, and it's quite complex. I'm simplifying it, and creates glucose. Of course, this also throws off oxygen. So we breathe this and we eat this. It's really good stuff. It's very complicated. It took 100 years of science to figure out how this thing worked, how it works. So we have an understanding this is the light phase, right? We've got light coming in from the sun. We've got water coming in from oceans, etc. We pull off the electron. It gets energized. It falls down and generates ADP. It loses its charge. We get more sun. It raises that electron to another level. This creates NADPH. This feeds into the dark cycle. This is the Calvin cycle, where we've got carbon dioxide coming in here. We've got our two compounds over here. Out comes sugar, and the process repeats and repeats. It is, so the folks who actually know what they're talking about here did the math on this and said, the only way to actually do this, to get like starch and sugars out of this process, is this particular mechanism, and it's insanely complicated. So what's the payoff here? Picture of Earth before photosynthesis. Not an actual picture of Earth before photosynthesis. This is Titan. After humans figure out how to get to Titan and take pictures of it. But it's presumed to be very similar to the atmosphere of Earth before photosynthesis. Photosynthesis, Earth after photosynthesis. This is great. It's wonderful. It's terraformed. It's terraformed. Terraformed Earth. And here, it's the Cyanobacteria did this. And here's how it happened. They did an offsite, right? They had a vision, this bold vision, and this is what they generated. It's very tight. They want, their goal, maintain atmospheric oxygen levels and supply all of light all of the organic compounds and most of the energy necessary for all life on Earth. That is tight. That is profound. Right? We're used to like having the vision statements and having the bold visions. But look, these guys did that. All right. So hopefully I've baited you here. Hopefully you are slightly curious about the potential of non-human processes, natural processes, to create utterly fantastic, complex, meaningful, important, transformative works of creation. Maybe you're skeptical. Okay, well, we'll see. We'll see. Maybe I can persuade you. All right. So you don't have to look there. You can look everywhere. Literally, you can look everywhere. You can go outside and go into the soil and find hundreds of thousands of tens of thousands of examples documented, thousands of examples documented by science of unbelievable phenomena. Right? Here we go. Species after species after species after species. I'd have to go back 26 times to represent the 8.7 million species. So it's out there. All right, so let's take a look at how this works. Incidentally, this is very interesting. This is sort of representative of the premise I have here. MIT roboticists needed to create a submersible that was low in power consumption and had a certain speed, and they went through all of the different known propellant methods for underwater, and they came up with this thing. I don't know where they got this idea. Right, how they figured this out, because it's very unusual. It's got fins, and they call this a dorsal fin here. Apparently it stabilizes. But anyway, they just ripped off nature. All right, so let's rip off nature. Here's an example of what I'm talking about is using biology to inform our thinking about software, speciation. And this example came about, I gave a talk that was similar to this, and somebody afterwards said, what you're talking about is evolution. It's evolutionary. It's step by step by step by step, and we'll see that's my thing. He's like, well, what if you need to have a revolution? What if you're in a startup, and the whole point of your startup is to have a revolution? Because no financiers don't pay for evolution. They pay for revolution, big returns on investment. All right, well, let's take a look at this. Speciation, by the way, is when you create species, right? This is how species create. So we're going to look at how this happens. But what's interesting about this, as an explanatory, is this punctuated equilibrium. What happens in fossil record is you will have this period of stasis, and you'll have a relatively short period of time where there's rapid change, and then you'll have some sort of big jump. And you can see this in the fossil record. It's fact. This isn't creation science. This is fossil record. And, of course, intelligent design said, well, my goodness, this is an example of some sort of deliberate design process. Something out there did this. This wasn't evolution. This was revolution. All right, so how might you explain this? You can explain this in a few different ways. One of the most common ones is allopatric speciation. This is speciation based on geography. Let's go through this. Lizard. Are you all with me? Lizard. Lizard comes down and encounters, this is a population of lizards, encounters some sort of geographic split. So it could be a lake, it could be a rift, whatever. Central Valley. All right. This guy gets split over here, this guy gets split over here. On this side, there's a different set of evolutionary pressures, of environmental pressures. Right? So the food is different, the predators are different, everything's different over here. This is similar. So what happens is this guy goes unchallenged and changes very little over time. We're talking millions of years. Right? This guy over here, this population, changes quite a bit. Maybe develops some sort of novel invention to deal with the environment. But it happens incrementally. It happens in an evolutionary way, traditional Darwinism. Okay, down here, you have a fossil record. Over time, the two populations come in, and they're different species. One is completely different. It has some sort of major innovation. Maybe it can soar or fly, or it has something different. And we have the fossil record here. And the fossil record is just a point in time. And we see, oh, look, something big happened during this time. No, something big didn't happen. They just got together, and they happened to get buried along in roughly the same time frame. What happened actually was that evolution, incremental, evolutionary step-by-step change, caused a revolution. So this is subtle, but it changes our way of thinking about big change. Big change is actually just a bunch of small changes. And let me give you a very specific example of how you can apply this seemingly innocuous idea to something that's very important to me personally, and that is Google Maps. I loved Google Maps before they made all of these ridiculous changes. About 6 or 7 or 8 months ago, all of a sudden, Google Maps went from great to utterly terrible. And I have no idea why. I was just like, what happened to this thing? And I can only speculate what motivated the change to go from fine to terrible. And I thought, well, maybe I have emotional problems and I just got attached to this really bad design. But I asked everybody, and like all my friends are like, it's terrible. It was like everything is terrible about this thing. So I'm like, well, Google, what if you used allopatric speciation? What if instead of doing this terrible thing to everybody, you learned from biology? How would that look? All right. We have a river, so it's a physical divide. We have Google Maps, and I'm going to call that the works perfectly fine version. That's the original one, the one that works perfectly fine. I'm going to call it that. Now, for some reason, the population splits, and we have a forking here. So now we have this allopatric speciation scenario. Now, Google Maps works perfectly fine, gets to enjoy, bug fixes, performance optimization, and the normal people up here get to enjoy it. Me, I get to enjoy it. I think I'm a normal, but I like this one. Down here, on the other hand, you've got something driving these bizarre changes, and this is called the revolution version. Okay, fine. Have your revolution version. Get all of your emotional issues about the beauty of your application out. Right? Build your app down here, but let it be driven by this ecosystem. Right? Just like the lizards had 2 different ecosystems, 2 different set of environmental pressures that could drive change. This one has its more conservative and reasonable set of requirements. This has the more radical, hipster, I don't know what happened here. Now, at the end, we can run that experiment and see where we're at. How different are these? Can they interbreed? Can they interbreed? Do we have the same species? Maybe we have 2 different apps here. Maybe we have Google crazy version and Google fine version. Who knows? But it gives you an option here. And this is a model that we can use that's lifted from this phenomena of punctuated equilibrium, the revolution. So when somebody says we need a revolution, you can just say, allopatric speciation, man, chill out. We just fork it, let it be exposed to a separate set of environmental pressures and see what happens. It might be the same app, it might be a different app. We don't know. Right? But nature tells us we can do this. Now, in fact, people do this. There are release methodologies that do this, and we call it something else. Okay, so it overlaps. So this is kind of common sense. But looking at biology gives us a really nice model saying, oh, if we want to really do something radically different, what do? We don't force change into something that's perfectly happy. We fork it and allow a different species to potentially emerge. We run an experiment. So what are some practical? Oh, let me. This ties into this. I'm jumping ahead here. So with respect to change, big change versus small, because right, revolution is big, evolution is small. R.A. Fisher, who is spoke on this, he's fairly famous for this example. Used a microscope as an illustration. So you have a microscope and you have it roughly in focus. It isn't perfect, right? It's roughly in focus. You can use it, but it isn't perfect. You have a couple options. You can make a really big change. Big change. Turn it big, turn it up this way or down that way, right? But it's big, whichever way. He says this: any large change will have a very small probability of improving the adjustment, right? It's relatively in focus, so you crank the thing in 1 or 2 directions, it's going to go out of focus every time, right? But he says this: in the case of the smallest change, the chance of improvement should be almost exactly 1/2. Now, for a lot of managers, 1/2 is unacceptable. Pound the shoe, unacceptable. I want 99.9% certainty. You say, look, this is basically infinitely better than this. That's a really good improvement. So if we can get half, that's really, really good. That's a big improvement over 0. So what are some lessons that we can take from this? Revolution is simply evolution over time. That's it. Don't get caught up in forcing a revolution. Revolution is retrospective. You go back in time and say, that was revolutionary. We didn't probably realize it. We were hoping for it, and we got it. We were lucky. But it's always evolutionary. It's always stepwise. So in terms of code or technology, the things that we work on, we should be really free to just fork something. Just fork it. Let it be exposed to different users, different programmers, different systems, different ecosystems. And at some point, maybe we can merge this in, or maybe not. But we're going to run an experiment and see what happens. Because remember, we're not God. We can't see the future, just like nature can't. Right? It's step by step by step. So maybe we merge it, maybe we don't. And finally, very importantly, large changes are usually bad. And this is a new thing. I've just, the folks I work with hate me for this, because I'm like, no, too big. Smaller change, smaller change, smaller change. It's been informed by this. So this is actually something that's really like impacted. It's impacted my colleagues probably in a negative way because they're sick of me doing this stuff. But you know, when it comes to an argument, if I can just say, hey, biology, hey, nature, it beats them every time. You can't argue with this. You cannot argue with the fact that we're here having this conversation today from these processes. You can't say the processes don't work. It's a really easy way to win an argument. It's kind of unfair, but all right. So did anyone come here explicitly because I had the word sex in the description? A few people did. Good. Thank you for being honest. Is anyone nervous about the next slide? You should be a little nervous. You should be nervous. You should definitely be nervous. All right. This is really one of the most beautiful pictures. This is not a beautiful couple there. They're just lovely. That's a nice picture, green and red. I didn't know this. This is something I learned in reading up on this. But almost all complex life reproduces sexually. Well, how else do you reproduce? Well, you can clone. And so sexual reproduction is taking two different individuals and merging their genes, taking randomly shuffling their genes and bringing them together. Cloning is an exact copy of the gene of the individual. Let's look at this. This is profound. This is very interesting. There's a huge penalty for sexual reproduction. It's very, very costly. And I'm going to use an example of a basketball team. So if you want the best basketball team ever, right, in the history of basketball teams, you take Michael Jordan. You do not take his offspring, right? His kids do not play basketball as well as Michael Jordan. They don't. It's just, no one plays basketball as well. And no one probably ever will. I'm from Chicago, so I'm biased. You clone him and create a team of clone Michael Jordans. What does sexual reproduction do? It takes the perfect basketball player and eliminates that person, that individual from history, erased. It's completely inefficient. It's bizarre. Why would almost all complex life use such a costly and non-optimal, suboptimal process of reproduction? Interestingly, the species that clone of complex life, so multicellular organisms, the ones that clone are new. They're relatively new species. It's believed that they will go extinct at some point. It's generally accepted that cloning is not a long-term viable strategy. So how does this work? You've got this cost. You have this cost. This gave Darwin fits. He looked at this particular bird and it's like, I think that my theory might be wrong here. This makes no sense to me. How is it that this absurdity happens? Well, it's the same reason that this absurdity happens. You have bizarre behavior that's simply a function of the discretion of one gender over another, and you have this arms race. Oh, I prefer blue feathers, so blue feathers, blue feathers, blue feathers. It just happened to be a preference. But it's a function, it's a cost, it's an overhead to sexual reproduction. Why? Why is this? At the heart of this, the reason that sexual reproduction happens, what the story is here, is this meiosis, which is random shuffling of genes. So this is the production of the sex cells, so sperm or eggs. And you take the chromosomes and you randomly remix them, and you get a specific instance of a cell. This is one cell, and it is a random mixture of the genes of that individual, shuffling. And then when you mate, you've got the combination of the two. The reason that this works, the reason that sexual reproduction is successful in the long term is this. The problem with cloning is that you have sort of a tyranny of a problem. You have tyranny of success, but you also have a tyranny of problems. You have something that is not beneficial stays in the population because it's cloned. By randomly shuffling, you have this phenomenon. These are two fruit flies. One has a big eye, curly wing, and the other has a slitty eye, straight wing. And these are the four permutations of these particular characteristics. Yeah.
Just as a side point, that there's also one big thing, I don't know if you're going to be going to that or not, but parasites also do play a big role in sexual reproduction, because one that not long ago, like in the last couple of years, that it also creates a buckling for parasites and diseases not to be able to transmit.
Yeah, so the point was that parasitism, it drove sexual reproduction, and that is definitely there's probably 4 or 5 big theories about why this is. This is one benefit of it. So there's probably the result is the fact is probably there's a number of reasons that have contributed to this being the predominating model across all complex life. So in this particular case, just to run through this, if one of these things has a disadvantage in a cloned environment, that disadvantage is going to spread. In this case, the disadvantage is going to get selected out. So you simply, for natural selection to work, go back to Paul Valéry. I guess nature figured that out before he did. You have to have options to select from. It's simply a way of introducing variation. Maybe not simply, but it is a way of introducing variation. And as it turns out, variation is valuable unto itself. So how do we do this practically? How might we apply this in our technical ecosystems? Have an ecosystem. Don't standardize on any particular language, database, application server. Who here is a Node.js fan? Okay, thank you for being honest. That's bold. No, I'm kidding. Who here is a Ruby fan? I'm going to really get you on this one. Don't answer that. Don't, that's fine. We all have our personal preferences. If you'll notice, my personal preference is Erlang. Did you guys notice this here? You didn't, apparently. I have a preference of Erlang. I use this. You'll see some advantages of it. I actually have some Erlang in here, but this is a problem for me. Having one go-to thing all the time. This is a big cost to sort of introducing variation. And this is something that's very new for me. I've changed my point of view because of this. Now, the fact is that it's a trade-off between short-term optimization and long-term viability, and you have to consider that. But it's a data point. It's something that informs our thinking. So what can we learn from sex? We can learn a lot of things from sex. But this case, homogeneity wins in the short term, but eventually goes extinct. So keep that trade-off in mind. Use your common sense. This isn't religion. We don't say, thou must do this. It's now just informing our thinking. Investing in diversity pays in the long run. Just investing in it, saying we know that this is not optimal. We know that by introducing, let's say, closure to our environment, our programmers are going to have 3 months of lower productivity. Let's say it's a JVM, it's a Java shop or Scala. We're going to bring in a completely different language, but we're going to run it within the VM. Reasonable. Lots of people are doing it. That's an investment. So managers need to sort of make a bet on that. And a certain amount of healthy diversity will pay off by having things to select from. And disadvantages can fall out, just like in sexual reproduction. So you need to be willing to select beneficial and abandon harmful for this process to work. Okay, we're just modeling biology. So that was sex. Now, of course, death. Let's just take it down a notch. I know everyone's real excited about that last topic, so we're just going to bring it down. Those Beatles were a little bit too much. Death. What I'm talking about here is not sort of old age death, but programmed cell death. This is very interesting. I also didn't know about this. My example of programmed cell death is Erlang, so I'm going backwards. But this is fascinating. So programmed cell death is apoptosis. And it is, when I say programmed, it's literally a function of programming within our cells, within the cells of life, to deliberately die. It's not an accident. It's not like the cells want to live and they're just clinging to life and they're killed by something. It's not external, it's internal. It's a self-destruct button. So what is going on here? So this is what happens. You have a normal cell. Something happens, and there's a number of different signals, death signals that can happen. It can be cell damage, but there are other ways of there are other things that can trigger cell death. Cell death is a very, very healthy and normal process. When this signal occurs, you've got shrinkage. Now I'm going to call this the cell freaks out and explodes. Right? That's my version of this, but there's more technical explanation. But it does freak out. Right? You have nuclear collapse. The macrophages are signaled, and the thing basically explodes, and then the macrophages remove it. It's garbage collection. Pretty cool stuff. It's cool stuff. It happens. So what's going on here? Our fingers are a function of the space between our fingers is a function of programmed cell death. Without programmed cell death, I'd have like sort of off-putting webs between you. You'd be like, "Oh, that's a terrible example," but I don't. Thankfully, because of this worked. When programmed cell death doesn't work, you get cancer. Things grow out of control. So it's an integral part of life is death. Strange, isn't it? How do we apply this? Well, of course, we all use Erlang, right? Because the Erlang was really conceived of. Quick primer on Erlang. If you want to build reliable systems, it's the easiest way to do it. Simple as that. And what makes it good for reliable systems is it's designed around this process of letting things die, of effectively programmed cell death. You have a kernel which manages the environment, just like an operating system. You can think of Erlang as an operating system for your program, or operating system for your code. It's architected and designed the same way. You have a kernel, and then you have these processes. Think of these as cells. A process is like a thread, but it's isolated from other processes. There's no shared memory. So it's a thread of execution that has its own heap, and it communicates with other processes through message passing. Right? Just like an operating system. When you run a program in your operating system, you don't share memory, thank goodness. Otherwise, you've got a bad operating system. Right? You communicate through message passing. Erlang takes the same model and lets you program that way for your software. But here's how a practical application of program cell death. Do something up here. This is Erlang code. I told you I'd sneak it in. So this is an assertion that it's going to succeed. We won't get caught up in all this stuff. This just means this is going to succeed or it's going to blow up. If it blows up, we have cell death. It's program cell death. The programmer said, if this isn't true, it's like an assertion, then die. This in Erlang allows you to do this sort of thing. It gives you a systems approach. And this is going to be, of course, applied to anything. Systems-oriented architecture is what we're talking about here. Taking things in isolation and letting them come and go as their life cycle determines. Also lets them die. So if we have a death here, right, the rest of the system continues. And we can restore this thing through programmatic cell restoration, right? We can create new cells. When our cells die, they're replaced all the time. So this sort of mechanism we can look to build in our systems. It's one of the most fundamental properties of building long-running reliable systems. Is this isolation and letting bad things die. You get some sort of corruption in your state and you kill it off, program cell death. Right, so this is a very direct way of applying this natural phenomenon to our software. Just use Erlang. All right, so what's the lesson here? Death is useful. Build for it. This is something that Google taught us. Don't try to build super, pieces of, don't use hardware that's going to run all the time, because at some point it's going to break. And if you have to deal with that one time it breaks, you can deal with it when it breaks 1,000 times. It changes the entire approach of your system. And our bodies work that way. There's all sorts of things that can fail on our bodies, but there are ways of handling that and ways of replacing it. So death is useful. Build for that. So examples of that, process crashing, service retirement, you can be applied at the project level. And the flip side is death requires life. I didn't get into this, but you need to be able to restart your processes, replace servers or services as they are merged or as they're retired, and you have lots of smaller projects rather than. These are sort of the things that you can think about when you build for death. Right? So it's interesting. It's interesting. Okay. Coelacanth. So who knows what a coelacanth is? I knew what it is, but I never knew how to spell it. It's a very strange name. But of course, it's this guy. 400 million year old species. Think about that. 400, almost half a billion. Long before before the dinosaurs, I think. When were the dinosaurs? No. Was it 600? Okay, so not quite. But a long time ago. Yeah, they did. I know they went away 65. I remember that one. But yeah. So this is really fantastic. This is the pearl of the natural kingdom. This is pearl of the COBOL even. Right. So how many people here like to clean their code up? They say, "Oh, that code is ugly." I do. Come on, be honest. Come on, you've got this is terrible code. I want to clean it up. I feel bad. Oh, that guy wrote this terrible code. I'm gonna clean it up. I had an interview question. And I didn't know, it was like, what's the problem with software today? And I said, the problem with software, there's lots of problems with software, but one of the problems is people are too afraid of refactoring. It's because they're big on refactoring. If you have some crufty code that's like hard to maintain, go in and be fearless and refactor. So I had all these tests, unit tests, to make sure that we'd handle regressions. I was big on refactoring. I've completely changed my point of view because of this fish. Seriously, this fish has changed my point of view. If it works, leave it alone. Right? 400 million years of working, there's no change. There's practically no change to this thing over that amount of time. If there's no evolution or if there's no environmental pressure to change, don't change. If you have environmental pressure to change, then you can change. But simply don't change for the sake of change or the sake of some sort of aesthetic. So what can we learn from the lowly coelacanth? By the way, it's always fun in a meeting when you get into a discussion, you can just say, coelacanth, And then they can't talk anymore because they know you got them. You beat them again. You beat them again. What can we learn from the coelacanth? Moral judgments don't apply. The coelacanth doesn't care. Doesn't care if you think he's ugly or not. He's going to be around long after we're gone. He's just going to be like, yeah, I've heard this before. I get this all the time, and I don't care. Moral judgments do not apply. Suitability is sufficient. And this is we'll get I have actually another example here. But suitability is a great word. Start to use that. Don't use the word performant or scalable or HA, right? Highly available. Just say suitable. That'll really irritate people. Hey, this is suitable. Oh, well, no. It's slow. It's suitable. It's fast enough. Right? No, it's not available enough. Really? Like, who's affected by it? It's good enough. Now, maybe that's different, but you can at least reason about what is actually required rather than sort of emotional or moral judgment about beauty, speed, elegance, grace. Think of the coelacanth when you go down that road. So change when there's only pressure to change. All right, I gave up the next one, so it's extinction. So this came from the last time I gave this talk at Codemotion Code Mesh in London. Somebody's like, I'm gonna get this guy. He's like, what about extinction? I'm like, oh shit, extinction. It's a really good point. But I'm like, wait a second. It happens, right? Comets happen. Things happen that are completely outside of your control that it's unreasonable to try to anticipate and deal with. It's a fact. It doesn't happen that often, thankfully, relative to other things, but it does happen quite a bit. Right? So this does happen. No plan survives contact with a comet. Uh-oh. Gotcha. I got him. Right? What happened? I did get him big time, because then I remembered, right? The dinosaurs went extinct, and the mammals, right, were allowed to come up out of their holes, and they're like, dinosaurs are gone. Dinosaurs are gone. That comet was awesome. So the extinction event was really, really good for them and good for us. So it's not the end of the world, quite literally. That seems like the end of the world. It certainly was for the dinosaurs, tragically, if you're a dinosaur. But I don't care. I'm happy that the dinosaurs aren't here. I don't want the dinosaurs here. So it's a trade-off, and we want to avoid extinction, but it is an event, and we should allow it, we should just respect when it happens. And so things can change. Our thinking about extinction changes our thinking about big events, big catastrophic events. First of all, they happen. Many, many times, something dying will make way for something else, like a forest fire, right? It's tragic that all that dead wood is burnt off and all those trees are gone. But what happens? New life springs up all over the place. So respect that. That's a phenomenon. That's an actual physical time and space event that you don't have to freak. You just say, how can we take advantage of this? Okay, dinosaurs are gone. How do we take advantage of it? You don't bet it all on the dinosaur, right? If keep your head. So diversity, variation, survivability, suitability. We're getting these things from just peeking into biology. Okay, my last example here. I got so excited. Has anyone been watching the new Cosmos series? So the Cosmos, has anyone watched the original one, Carl Sagan, 1980? Oh, really? Go out and go to wherever you get your content. Don't say, like, wherever you get your content, and check out Cosmos, either the original one or the new one. It is absolutely amazing. It is the very best scientific thinking applied to like storytelling mode, to just beautiful entertainment, very artful, very humane and loving and wonderful. I'm inspired by it. But I was watching this the other day, and I ran into this thing. Our eyes, right, yours and mine, evolved underwater. I guess maybe I didn't think about it, but it's true. And what happened is, as we, figuratively speaking, emerged from the water into the air, our eyes adapted to the air, but the fundamental design of this eye is suboptimal for air, and it always will be. It's not fish see much better than we do. We went backward when we left the water. Right? We see okay, but it's not as good. And in the series, the question was, well, why didn't evolution just start over again? Why didn't we get the optimal eye? Well, that's not the way evolution works. It doesn't work. It doesn't start over. It's always progressing forward through incremental changes. So this is a fish, crazy fish, has 4 eyes, has one up here for air and one down here for water. This is an actual fish. It actually exists. I don't know what it's called, but it's crazy. I was so excited about this because, you know, have you ever gotten to talk about technology and you feel anxious about some new thing that comes along? And you know, your stuff works okay, but some new thing comes along, like Node. This thing Node, right? It's popular and it's cool. And you're like, oh, I've been using Python Twisted. And I've been doing async programming using callbacks for like 10, 12 years now, and it's really painful. And this cool new thing comes out. Should I just change and transform and redo everything else? I get this all the time because, you know, there's a lot of working code in our organization, code that works perfectly fine. Something comes up, and it's like, hey, we should use this. This is better. And now I've got something to beat them. I can beat them. I can use this thing. I can say, look, our eyes are what? They're not optimal, they're suitable. So we don't have to get like caught up in like, is it absolutely the best that it possibly could be? That is not a relevant question when it comes to nature, at least. The thing that enables this conversation to happen, pretty successful, pretty good, right? It doesn't care about optimization, it cares about suitability. Is it good enough to survive, period? So I don't have to get anxious about it. Please define the problem. What are we trying to do here? What are we solving? Where's the pressure? What's the environmental pressure? Don't just make me feel like emotionally unstable because something goes faster than the thing, you know, that we did over here, right? I get emotionally unstable all the time, and I don't want to feel bad about that. I want to solve actual problems. So what are some lessons that we can learn from this? Well, we don't need to start over. We don't need to take something that's working perfectly well. Maybe not, it's working perfectly well for what we need. It isn't the best. We don't have to take it and throw it away and start over from scratch. We don't need optimal, we need suitable. Start to use the word suitable. It will annoy people. I can't wait to use this. I can't wait to be able to use this word more and more. Okay, so those are some examples, and the list goes on and on. Obviously, the list goes on. Literally, just throw a dart at a biology book and go dig into it and think, oh, interesting. I wonder how I can use the primitives here, the examples, the model, and just be creative. It's very, very, very rich ecosystem to be inspired to think about software differently. So mitochondria. So this is in our DNA. This is like the merging of a bacteria, right? And through this merging, we have this synthesis, or symbiosis, that resulted in this massive energy engine, which resulted in big complex life, not just small, teeny ones, but really, really big. It was an example of combining two forces. So you could look into that and understand the mechanics of how that might happen. And maybe use that as a model. You know, maybe just call it the mitochondrial model of symbiosis, which will also piss people off if you say that. Okay, junk DNA, very, 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 very interesting. Amoeba genome, 220 times larger than ours, the amoeba. How do you explain that? Well, there's a lot of junk. There's a lot of stuff that the amoeba isn't using. So, do we need to refactor? Do we have a bunch of code that's sitting out there doing nothing, that's terrible, crufty, and we feel, again, emotionally insecure about that because we're perfectionists and artists and creative people? Just think of the lowly amoeba who doesn't care about all the garbage, is happy, is ignorant, is suitable, reproduces. Yeah? It's very judgmental of me to call it junk. Isn't it terrible? Thank you for correcting me on that. I'll be more sensitive to the amoeba in the future. And I did not mean for any amoeba fan out there, I did not mean to insult the amoeba. But I did use a very negative term there, and maybe we should use it confusing or ambiguous, or we're not really sure what it does. But I have, all I know is I don't want one inside of me, so I'm not a real fan of amoeba. I don't know. It's just it's a species disposition I have. Amoebas hurt you badly. Okay. This is, I have like, the problem with this, here's the actual problem with this whole approach, is that I am not nearly smart enough to go figure this stuff out. So I have like 5 books on the immune system. I went crazy. I'm like, oh, that's great. I'm going to learn about how all this stuff. It's so complex. It's so incredibly complex. I can't even begin to understand it. I'm like reading this thing going, but it's not to say it's not worthwhile. Like I know that there are patterns within the immune system that we can tease out and say, okay, this is a good way to create sort of an adaptive corrective process for some sort of problem, monitoring and responding to problems. There's stuff in there, I bet, spending time thinking, writing blog posts, etc. So it's another area to explore. Okay, let's revisit the point again. What is that point again? Here's one model. Ah, so boring, boring. Oh my God! If I had to do a UML diagram, I would literally go ballistic. I don't want to do this. I don't want to think this way. I want to think this way. This is fun to me. I like the word ecosystem. I like organisms. I like species. I like different functions. I like the fact there's a rotting log here, right? You have rotting logs. This is kind of weird. You're talking about like sort of a human disposition. It smells funny to me, but it's a really rich ecosystem for other creatures. Right? This could be the Ruby of the language. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry. It's a way to dispassionately disarm your prejudices. I don't like certain languages. I don't. I'm vocal about it. I don't like what they do to people. I don't like how people respond to it. I think there's a lot of crazy nonsense out there. That's just a personal disposition. The fact of the matter is, this is my personal, the grubs in here don't think it's rotting. It's their house. They love it. So don't stop judging. It's an ecosystem. Awesome. Okay. These are books written by scientists for popular audience, for general audience. They're fantastic. There's a certain quality of scientist that it has to be brilliant, both scientifically, but also brilliant socially, right? And being able to understand and communicate. And each one of these books is written by authors. Of course, there's many, many more authors that can do this, but these are some examples that I have and would recommend. These will be online, but they're fun reads, and they're great. They're fun. So for inspiration or fun reading, if that. So with that, we've got some time for questions. Are there questions? By the way, MongoDB's web scale is you get that? Okay. Anyway, that's right. We're not done. No, thank you very much. That was nice. We have 10 minutes, so there's a lot of time for Q&A. Yeah.
So, because of what you said, what do you think about open source software compared to closed source?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, question was, given this, what do I think about open source software versus closed source software? I mean, if you look at what's happened with GitHub. And GitHub is just a sort of a centralized instantiation of distributed version control. I mean, think about what's going on. We have a copy of our entire genome in every single cell, two I think, in every single cell. Nature copies and replicates and has different versions and forks things and changes them all the time. It's exactly, I mean, to me, it's an exact parallel, right? So what is in GitHub? You have access to the source control. You have access to the source. I can fork something. I can change it. I can introduce variation. My fork might end up becoming the predominating fork if I have added features to it and chose not to merge it. So you've got like the same speciation argument where you fork and divert or fork or merge. All that is enabled through the source control tools, but all of that is fundamentally enabled by this being open. So if you have closed source, you cut out your variation, or you cut out your options. So if genius is the process of selecting from options, the more options you have to select for, the better. So it is extremely important. I would almost call it the bedrock. So yeah, it's like without that, we're back in the dark ages. We're back in pre-Cambrian software times.
Do you think closed source software can be successful in the long term?
Yeah, I mean, I would call it a dinosaur. I mean, I think that it's destined to extinction. I've thought that for a long time. I think the model is just too inefficient. It's feeding off of nutrients that are going to go away at some point. And the open source model is just better. It's very hard to charge for licensed software. It's a personal opinion. I can't see into the future, but I suspect that it's going to go away completely at some point. Questions? There's got to be some more questions.
So how do you explain this when you're quite interested, for example, a customer says, this can be done, but maybe you're that, but if you got your competitive advantage.
Yeah, yeah.
How do you accept?
So if I understand the question correctly, it is, if you're presenting a model that is predicated on rejecting things as much as it is accepting, right? So if you're going to select some options, you're going to select one, you're by default rejecting all the other ones. How do you deal with customers who are paying you money to write software? You're like, oh yeah, we're going to do a bunch of things, and then we'll just reject. We like death. We like things to go extinct. Garrett said the software's biology and extinction's fine. The customers are like, okay, we won't be using you as a vendor. So this is a big problem. So first of all, the quick and easy answer is this is an early stage. This is not agile. This is not directed at decision makers. This is directed at practitioners who are trying to build software and want to do something fun and learn. I don't know exactly how you translate things out in every particular case. This is new. It may emerge. There may be like well-established answers. Now I'm going to make something up. I'm going to try to answer your question. How would I do that? If somebody said, well, if they come in, so here's a typical scenario. Somebody says, I want this. Customer says, I need this. I would say, okay, help me understand the problem. Because oftentimes what they're doing is they're describing the solution. That's a God mentality, right? They see something in their eye and they say, that's what I want. But what's really happening is they have environmental pressure to change. What is that environmental pressure to change? What are some of the options that we can lay out for them before we write code, right? Just to help to enumerate those things. And so yes, the agile ecosystem, the agile methodologies have models for this. But it's to basically say, look, you're prescribing a solution to me. Help me understand what the problem is, and then we'll explore some options. And then we'll reason together about which options seem like the ones to explore first, and then go down that road. But you do that at a very granular level so that there's no one big change, there's no one big leap. You prove things out before. So I would approach it that way. And that gets more into the agile camp, where there's methodologies that help you to communicate to paying customers. And I think I would go down that road. But they definitely overlap and they definitely butt into the stuff that I'm talking about here, for sure. It's just a different way of communicating it. 5 more minutes, so more questions, please.
How was this perceived in the Bible Belt?
I have not dared to give it. It's been London and here, so yeah, I don't know how that would come over. I don't know. Be interesting. Yeah, so Francesco's question was related to this. So where I'm from, the United States, we have a lot of like true believers in that evolution is bunk, and the Jesus picture, maybe not literally hovering over Earth, but there's some intelligent force creating things. This is fine. I think the weight of evidence is against it, but let's just say I'm being fanciful and that there is no scientific evidence for any of this. Fine. It doesn't change the fact that these are good ideas, so we can still use them. Yeah.
Maybe just a little bit of a stretch, but going back to this, to the quote from Paul Valéry, like a lot of people say that there's no real invention, right? You just recombine things that already exist.
Yeah.
And that kind of invalidates the whole idea of intellectual property, right?
Yeah.
What's your
So the question is, if invention is simply an iterative process and there's no big revolutionary, there's only incremental improvements, what does that do to intellectual property? Is an area completely outside my expertise, and I really, there are certain things that to me are so complex they overwhelm me. This one feels like one of those things. What's my gut feeling? In terms of policy, I really try to stay clear. I'm the little mammal who's crawled into the hole. I just don't want to deal with those. I believe that that's all dinosaur material. I don't know how it's going to fall out, but there's so many crazy inefficient things that happen in large organizations. But when large organizations are governments and big private organizations, it doesn't matter what they are. They're dysfunctional at such extreme levels that it's just like, to me, it's just a marvel. It's a marvel at how pathological we as a species can be when we get together and create institutions. I mean, this is George Orwell stuff. This is like, I believe that it's just messed up, and I don't know how it's going to shake out. But I'm in my whole programming. I don't want to look. Yeah.
The same thing. I mean, the same evolutionary process that happened in software, is it happening in other organizations?
Probably, yeah. So the question is, or observation is that it's all evolution anyway. So why am I picking on human institutions? It's still just a function of physics, which is certainly the case. Yeah, I mean, I would look at maybe communism as the quintessential example of a political institution and an economic institution that ultimately couldn't sustain the laws of physics. The laws of physics caught up with it. Maybe that's a very simplistic example, but I'm American, so we like good and evil and bad forces and good forces, so forgive me. But I mean, it's, you know, the Soviet Union failed. Controlled economies are you know, they may have some social benefits, and there may be some moral benefits that we look at. You know, but there are mathematically inefficiencies involved, and over time, you know, if the money's gone, the money's gone. You know, and so maybe, you know, maybe the laws of physics will catch up with these. It is interesting, and I would probably put that in the dinosaur category, where you just have enough mass sustaining these things. They grew up through merit somehow, at some point, natural resources or other economic innovation, and they're living off of the residuals of those things, and at some point they have to change or they'll go away. But it's too complicated for me. I really, truly believe it's just too complicated for me to really understand it. So I don't like things I can't understand, so I like to go into the hole in code. That's what I do. Yeah.
There are some experiments into building software automatically.
Yeah.
And since they typically use methods that are more similar, for example, to evolutions or things like this, how do you feel toward this experiment?
So the question is that there's work being done in genetic algorithms which are used to create solutions using natural selection through simulation. And like, for example, sorting algorithms can be used by randomly iterating, or it can be sort of discovered by randomly iterating and then selecting based on different criteria. This is
Exactly. Do you think they can be successful?
I'm certainly skeptical. Here's what I think about that. First of all, it has nothing whatsoever to do with what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is you just completely orthogonal. I think it's silly to what's happening here is people are trying to start over from before the time of humankind. So why would you do that when our brain is a function of this evolutionary process? Our brain and our social abilities are really at the cutting edge of problem solving. So I don't feel a need to go throw like really, really slow serialized silicon-based computing power when I have 4.5 billion years of evolution and, you know, the current state. I want to leverage that. I mean, the universe and the Earth as a parallel computer to generate options is what? Infinitely more powerful than that? So let's use that rather than like a bunch of silicone thinking we're going to be, you know, the primordial soup with this like fraction of computation power. I think it's interesting, certainly, and some fascinating things might come out of it. But it's not. I don't think it's going to change. It's not going to change much. That's a terrible thing to say. Whoever does this professionally, I apologize. It may change everything. I don't know. I don't know. Okay. Yeah.
Similar question. What's your opinion about artificial intelligence?
Yeah.
Neural networks, logic programming, difference between these two methodologies of artificial intelligence?
So I'm not an expert in artificial. The question is about artificial intelligence, different methodologies, perhaps contrasted with this.
And how it can be included on this.
Yeah. Okay. So the question is about how can work in artificial intelligence? How does it work on artificial intelligence fit into this scheme? And what do I think about it? I'm not an expert. I dropped out of the artificial intelligence program at University of Edinburgh because it was too weird. ML just bothered me, and I left. So I don't. But I would say it's a similar type of thing. Why are we trying to? I mean, I think being automatic in solving things. Making decisions, you know, Mars rover having to make decisions, but we guide the Mars rover for the most part. It's not out there doing its own thing. So we're leveraging the best and brightest, which is us. So I think crowdsourcing or you know, maybe, you know, a monitoring system that involves human beings somehow might be more. I think I'm out of time. Did somebody cut me off? There was another talk here. Yeah. All right. I'm gonna cut that out. So. There's a coffee break. Okay, I'll answer the question then. We are the cutting edge of artificial intelligence. We are artificial intelligence. We are. I don't think that we're ever going to get a master, like a slave race that's going to then rebel and then take over the world. That's ridiculous. Robots will always and forever be tools of humankind. Always. That's evolution. We're going to select out. It's like, so why we don't have wolverines biting, you know, wolves. We've taken the wolf and we've domesticated it. We have nice dogs that we can pet and that hunt with us. It will always be the case that robots will be good pets. Always. They will never rebel. because we are the ones that select. We would have to let that robot go through 3 billion years of evolution before it could become something that could ever be a threat to us. Don't worry about the robots. It's science fiction. It's never going to happen unless it comes from outer space. Then we're in trouble. All right, thank you very much.